All right, you're good to go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is day 5 of the conference. I hope you all had an amazing week. This session actually puts me in alignment with the conference because today we're going to talk about fundraising with cryptocurrency. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Patrina Pelton Smith. I am the founder, CEO, and principal consultant of the Business of Charity. We are located here in Houston, Texas. However, I have been blessed to work with organizations across the US. So I say that I have worked with organizations from Hawaii to Maryland, as well as some in Africa. And so with that being the case, we have a wide experience in helping organizations not only fundraise through grant writing, but we also help with formations and capacity building so that you are grant ready. Because the key piece is that we can write you a great application, but what happens after that when you actually receive the award? So we focus a lot on that as well. And then fundraising with cryptocurrency is one of the areas where we also provide services because we want nonprofit organizations to be able to receive funding. So we'll get started. So first and foremost, when you hear cryptocurrency, particularly for organizations of color, and I work with quite a few of those, it frightens them. When I say cryptocurrency, because to be frank, many outside those who are comfortable with cryptocurrency have not done a lot of research or are not aware of the types that are out there. So they just know Bitcoin. They don't necessarily know about any of the other coins that are available. And so in their minds, it's something to stay away from, because the other thing that they often hear when they hear Bitcoin is that someone has been scammed. We know that it is a huge industry out there around scamming. And so that's why education in this area is so important for nonprofits in general. And then making sure that if you're wanting to pursue a policy of accepting crypto, whatever form that may be, that you're ready for it. So today's presentation, we'll talk about that in a large part. So what you want to be able to do is to expand your fundraising options, but also make it easier for you in that process. So you want to make sure that you're reaching the appropriate donor. You don't want to stray into an area, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, where you're not really familiar with it or comfortable. But we do want to broaden your horizons. And so making sure that you have a policy in place that will allow you to accept it without a struggle is our key focus. So we help you do that. We help you with the policies and the procedures, and you will leave with a framework once we have assisted you in creating a place where your donors can come and actually give you crypto of any form that you choose to accept. So for those who are already familiar with it, there are donors out there, and I know if any of you all are familiar with, and I'm sure they are there as one of the participants today, the Giving Block. They really became prominent in this space in about 5 years ago, right around 2020, when they started not just Giving Tuesdays. For those who are familiar with Giving Tuesday, it's been in place since roughly 2000, I believe, 2002, somewhere in there, but quite a while. And so organizations had found that the Monday after Thanksgiving, that they would market their organizations and kick off their campaign, or in the middle of their end of year giving season or campaign. And so Giving Tuesday has featured prominently in that. So the Giving Block created Crypto Giving Tuesday, where those who had cryptocurrency could also give on that day. So if you're familiar with that, it's pretty much the same idea. The idea is that as an organization, you already have channels ready, open, and available for them to give. And then at that point, they are able to give you whatever they're choosing: NFTs, digital assets, whatever it may be, they will give you that item. And so it makes your credibility go up, because for the most part, larger nonprofits, such as the American Red Cross and others, have been accepting cryptocurrency almost from the outset. So for about 10 years or so. And so you will be joining in with other organizations that are doing this, accepting this, and are profiting from it, because what many may not realize is that cryptocurrency, particularly Crypto Giving Tuesday, went from being about a $2 million proposition at the early stages to now it's already in the billions. It jumped in about 2 years. And so obviously there's an opportunity there, a window for another revenue stream. And because people are already looking to give in this manner, it makes it much simpler for you to be able to accept it without having to push it across, hard across the various social media channels, because those people are already interested in it. So the goal for today is that we are going to help you set your goal, create your policies so you have your guardrails around this, identify platforms where you can actually participate in this, and then make sure you set up your operations so that your sales team, your development team, your accounting team all know what happens when you receive a cryptocurrency donation. And then, of course, you want to do your messaging so that you're educating your donors that this is now something that you accept and do. And then you also want to make sure that your donation page or pages are a trusted entry point, because again, we have to talk about the fact that there are scams that are out there. And so if they are not aware, then obviously there will be some struggle around, is this what we do? Are they doing this now? Or is this a scam page? Is this a spam? There are all sorts of reasons why donors might not trust it. So you want to make sure that you are clearly communicating that message so that they will know that this is a legitimate way that you are accepting now fundraising and donations. So the next thing, there we go. So once you have focused in on these key 4 areas, so first of all, set your goal. What is the goal with this? If you go into this with the idea we're just accepting cryptocurrency, but you have no established target, then it's going to look like that in your social media marketing. I'm guilty of that. If I don't clearly give you an action point, then you don't know what to do with the information that I'm sharing on my social media channels. You're just like, oh, great, she shared that information. But obviously, when you are setting your goal, you want to identify the target and what are you going to do with the funds. What we call now impact giving is very prominent in making sure donors understand why you're giving those funds to them. So impact giving may be as simple as saying, we're going to raise $10,000 and that giving is going to help us fund our mission by providing counseling, providing housing, providing food, clothing, whatever it may be. It can be also much more granular. You may say that, your $10,000 is going to pay for 12 months of counseling to individuals who come into our organization, and it will give them at least 3 hours of counseling per person for a total of 300 people. So you can make it very granular, you can keep it more high level, but at the same time, you need to make sure it's clear to them what purpose it's going to be used for. Make sure you create your policies. Your policies, you should already have policies and procedures in place that talk about your donations. If you don't, we talked about that a little bit on Monday, where we talked about creating your policies and procedures, and a little bit about it yesterday. So you want to make sure that in your policies and procedures, there is a place for you to accept cryptocurrency, digital assets, NFTs, whatever it may be, and what you will accept and what you will not accept. Just because it is a crypto asset does not mean it changes how you take and accept donations. So for instance, years ago, New Horizon Family Center wanted to accept donations from a bingo hall. And it was before I became the executive. I was still the director of non-residential services. And my executive came to me and she said, what do you think about this? And I pointed out to her that because it was gambling, yes, it was legal. It was a bingo hall. Actually, it wasn't a bingo hall. That's what it was. It was a game room. Game rooms in Texas are not legal. That's what it was. And so I immediately said to her, well, they're not legal. And so even though they want to make you a slush fund, don't do it. Because if they go down, you accepting the funds, you're taking illegal proceeds. That's going to be a problem. And so, there went that discussion. There was no need to move any further with that. But you want to make sure that whatever purpose you have earmarked, because there are some organizations out there that do not want to accept funds from AI farms because they say that it's an environmental impact that's negative on the communities. And so I know that discussion is out there for a lot of organizations and companies who are thinking about tapping into that space. And so, with that being the case, your board needs to have a conversation around who and why and from whom will you accept the cryptocurrency. And so you're clear about it. And so if someone comes to you and from an area that you're like, I don't think so. We don't want to accept funds from organizations that offer gambling. That's just not who we are. Then you can say no with confidence of knowing you already have that in the policy. It's clear. And you will be able to accept it and move on, or not accept it and move on. Now, the next thing you want to make sure that you do is you accept a model. There are multiple models out there, ways to do this. And so I know Jackie has mentioned the book that she and I co-wrote several years ago. It does a deep dive into wallets, whether you use a warm wallet, a cold wallet, whether you hold it, whether you sell it, and then use those funds. There are so many methodologies out there. That's one of the reasons why we come into this space and help you make those decisions. So you want to make sure that you're clear about that too, because I think a lot of fear for my particular clients, many of them are startups. And so for them, holding cryptocurrency would not make sense. They need the cash in play. So there are the options to go through where you're accepting it directly from the individual, meaning you have set up whatever service you want to use to accept it, or going through a third party like the Giving Block. And there are others out there as well. And again, my disclaimer, I am not affiliated with anyone, so there is not any organization that I specifically recommend. I recommend you do your due diligence, which we will help you do, and accept a organization or party that will give you what you need to do this successfully. And so, whether you choose to do it directly or whether you choose to do it through a third party, then I do recommend that you make that decision and then set it up. And then only use wallets and other resources when it makes sense to your organization. Because remember, a lot of this, will be managed by your CFO, your executive director. You may even have a development director who steps into this role and takes on this responsibility. While I have not seen this come to fruition yet, what will probably happen is that you'll have someone who just manages your cryptocurrency if it begins to scale and take off at that level. And so you want to make sure that you have potentially some other things in play, like insurance that specifically covers your cryptocurrency, as well as bonds, fidelity bonds that cover the person who is managing that. Because obviously you don't want anyone to take money from you, no matter the form it is in, whether it is crypto or whether it's fiat, that would be able to then escape and take your money with you. Happens all the time, unfortunately, sometimes internally, sometimes externally. So obviously you want policies and controls that are in place that will avoid that. And then the next thing that we're going to talk about is then how do you share that information with your donors? Because obviously you want them to now be aware that you're accepting cryptocurrency. And so social media channels obviously is a great place for you to start. But you may also look at other places that you may not normally visit. So, the traditional places of, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, yeah, Instagram. Those are the top four that come into mind, but there are other places where you may also want to publish this. So Discord is another place where you may find that you want to um, basically publish that and let people know. Discord is usually around those who are on games. They communicate through those channels. So the other thing that you need to think about when you're communicating it is the age group and the demographics for whom you are communicating to. It is much more likely that you're going to receive a cryptocurrency donation from someone who is a Generation X or younger versus a boomer or a silent generation. So, with that in mind, you also want to make sure your marketing speaks to the audience that you're trying to reach. So, social media channels are just one of many ways that you may communicate that. It may also be through email and text, more traditional ways of communicating it, but you're giving them the access, the tools, and the resources to make those instant donations. So, whatever fits for your organization, but I do caution everyone to make sure that it is across the board. You're communicating to all of your potential donors because you never know where money may be. But at the same time, you market it in spaces where you definitely know those donors exist. You also want to make sure that you give them plenty of education around how they are donating, why they're donating, and after they donate, what are some of their responsibilities. So you may want to create a landing page that has a Q&A for them so that they can have some questions answered. You may want to, as you're distributing your information, make sure you have a little Q&A because I know social media only gives you so much room, characters for you to publish things, but then have a link where they can go back to that landing page on your website or wherever you create it, because Linktree may be the place where you drop it. But the key piece is making sure that they understand and can put trust and value in the fact that you are communicating your way that you're receiving donations, and then again, what happens afterwards. Because depending on the size of the donation, there are certain documents that must be completed with the IRS. If you're donating more than $5,000, or not dollars, but cryptocurrency, then you have to complete a form and submit it to the IRS. The question then becomes, who submits that form? Who completes that form, rather, and then who submits it to the IRS? Well, as the donee, rather, you want to make sure that you submit that to the donor so that they can submit it with their taxes. But if they're not even aware that that's something that they need to do, then you want to cover your bases and make sure that you initiate that process. And then don't forget your donation page. Now, for traditional donations, you want to make sure that the information is always at the top of your website. If they have to scroll, if they have to click, they're not going to do it. So as simple and easy as possible, close to the top of the page as necessary to keep their attention, and make it as simple as possible so that they can do it in one click. That's the industry standard. And so make sure that when they do that and complete the donation, that they do have the instructions, disclosures, acknowledgement, expectations. If you're using any of those CRMs out there, those customer relation management tools, and there are tons of them, I can't even begin to start listing all of them that are available for you to use, then you can actually automate a lot of this so that you don't have to worry about doing it every time a donation is received. But that way, you know that it's completed. Now, if you're doing manually, then make sure that you have a process in place, step by step, and whoever is responsible for completing that, make sure that they're aware that they're tracking these donations so that they can go ahead and complete their acknowledgement. Because ideally, you want to acknowledge a gift in 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours, so that donor feels like they have been received and that they are appreciated. So it's nothing changes on this side of it just because it's a cryptocurrency donation. You still want to make sure you do your due diligence and acknowledgement, disclosures, and maintaining the relationships. So Once you have implemented your policies, then you can walk through putting all of these things into place. And so hopefully, if you've already started thinking about this, you have some ideas about where you're going. If you have not thought this, this is brand new, you never even thought about accepting cryptocurrency as a way to raise funds for your organization, then this is a good framework for you to come in and use so that way you don't miss anything. And when you're ready to go, you just hit the button and you go. Now, one of the other things, and I always like to talk about this in general with fundraising, because you just never know where the donor may be. So as you are publicizing this, you may find that you have donors that never ever would have given to you simply because you became a member of this particular type of organization ecosystem. So it brings to mind, if anyone is familiar with, oh, of course, I was getting ready to say exactly the foundation, and it is GuideStar. Thank you. There we go. So GuideStar is what I like to call the BBB of nonprofits. GuideStar has different levels where you can go in and register your organization. So while they don't necessarily focus on cryptocurrency at all, they do have a way for you to register your organization moving through I think it starts at bronze. And once the more information you share with them, the higher you go. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this is because when I share this with clients, I've had several clients who've gone in, have registered, and because they were on GuideStar, they were able to receive donations from, they didn't even know who the donor was, but the donor went to GuideStar, found them, and began sending them recurring donations. So the reason why I mention this in this space is because it's the same concept. Once you make that, make your donation policy known, you will probably start receiving donations that you never anticipated. And what's the best way to fund your organization? With money that you didn't have to go out there and do a huge amount to raise it. So other things to think about, make sure that your board sits down and answers these hard questions. And I say your board simply because many of the organizations that I work with are still a working board, meaning they're doing a lot of the work. They don't necessarily have teams in place or staff. If you have an organization that has a team in place, that they have staff, then obviously you want to include them in this conversation. So you would probably even start with them to work out your framework. And then once you have that framework in place that you believe would be a good process for you and your organization, take it to your board of directors and have it approved so that way you're moving through your process seamlessly. There's no issues, no one is surprised. And definitely, of course, raise this conversation with your CFO or your treasurer so that they too can chime in and include their 2 cents, pun intended, in the process of how you're going to raise and manage this money. So all of the things here are many of the things we've already talked about. What type of assets will you accept? Once you accept it, is it an automatic process, or does it have to be cleared through the channels before you begin to accept that? That is something that you can put into your current framework for accepting donations, so it doesn't have to make this an extra step. It's just there. If you already have a framework that says that if we accept donations over the amount rather of $5,000, and your framework is that it has to be reviewed by the CFO, it has to be then reviewed by the executive. The executive may or may not take it to the board before it's approved. Then that's your framework, and that doesn't change just because it's cryptocurrency. But then the next step comes into play. What happens to that cryptocurrency? Are you accepting it as a coin, or are you accepting an NFT or another type of digital asset and then you hold it, or are you converting it promptly? And that way you are then taking the actual fiat and placing it into your treasury. So those are questions you will have to make a decision on to ensure that you are ready to go. And then how will you acknowledge it? How do you value it? You know, I don't know if you all remember, maybe this was just a Texas thing that happened, but around 2004, um, we were accepting vehicles as donations, and we would sometimes take those vehicles and, if they needed some work, we would work on them and then we would donate them to clients. In 2004, the law changed. And after that, the law at that time was that if you donated a vehicle, you could then, assess the value, whatever value you wanted to give it, and take that on your taxes. So December's for us at New Horizon were exciting because sometimes we would get 3 or 4 cars in that time period, and if they were great, we would turn them over to clients and give them keys, which was great for them. But if they weren't so great, then we would, I think they sold them. I wasn't the ED at that time. So I think they sold the cars or whatever, and, then use the cash in our operations. But when the law changed and you could no longer assess the value of the vehicle, it had to have, I believe the law became, market value based upon Blue Book and other types of services. The number of cars that we received dropped substantially. We went from receiving sometimes 3 or 4 cars a year to maybe only receiving one when December rolled around. And so you want to be able to acknowledge the value of whatever that gift is. At that time, we would just, whatever they wrote on the paper, that was the value we acknowledged as an in-kind donation. And then after that, we have to say, okay, based upon the Blue Book value of this car, it's only worth $500 versus someone who said, no, it's really worth $13,000. So same policy, you need to decide how you're going to value it. Are you going to use the market value for those coins, or are you going to use something else? Now, once you have decided how you're going to document it and acknowledge it, then you're going to think about the risk. And actually, you probably have already thought about the risk at this point in terms of whether or not you should accept a particular type of coin, from whom you are accepting it. Those are risks, right? So you've already probably thought about that before we even get here. But if there's any other red flags that kind of, pop up as you are going through the process, then don't be afraid to put a pause on it. And that's where it is a good place to say, you know what? Let me pause before we accept this donation. Let me run it through our process. Let our team evaluate it, and then we have the board review it. And you go from there, because it is better sometimes to pause than to take a risk that is unknown. So once you have completed all of these processes, you are now at the point where you're just trying to make a determination, is this a good fit for you? Because maybe accepting cryptocurrency is not a good fit. And that's okay. You can continue doing what you're doing to raise funds. If it is working for you, I, congratulate and celebrate you, because that's not always the case with many of my donors, because they have not always put in the foundation that they need to be able to go out and really get funding. But if it is a good fit, then you're just expanding your portfolio of offerings for you to accept donations. And again, you may be attracting a donor who otherwise may not have given to you previously, but will give to you now, because it gives them a benefit on their taxes. And so one thing to think about, cryptocurrency is considered a property versus a cash donation. And so that means that there are some benefits for donors that they take advantage of with giving you crypto versus giving you fiat. So as we are closing this out, make sure you have your policy in place. Make sure you have your tools ready to go. Make sure that you have your accounting systems that will help you put that into your operations and your budgets. And then make sure your messaging makes you credible, makes this a benefit, and makes your donor believe that this is a good decision that will help them. So are there any questions today? Okay, so readiness before you launch, you want to make sure. Define why cryptocurrency belongs or does not belong in your fundraising strategy. Draft in policy and assign your ownership. Who's going to own this process? And it may be multiple people who are involved in it, but who manually or internally oversees it, and then evaluate and make sure you have everything in place. Because maybe you're using a CRM that doesn't accept cryptocurrency. So maybe you need to go out and find one that does. And does that mean that the entire organization shifts to that platform? Maybe because of cost, but maybe not. Maybe it's just as simple as having a landing page that sends them to a place where they can make that donation. And if you're not aware, there are many organizations that will allow you to accept crypto without doing any hard work. So Stripe is one of them. Stripe is a processor, and they are accepting cryptocurrency. In fact, through my business, I have already turned on Stripe in the background. I've not messaged that I'm accepting crypto yet, but it is something that I can easily begin to format and put the policy out there that that is a form of currency that I am taking. And actually, for one of my groups that I work with, I am a member of a group that has a coin. And so I have quite a bit of coins from that organization. It just makes sense for me to use it with them. So again, you want to make sure that when you are defining the platform that you're going to use, again, ease of use is also one of the key factors. And then the cost of use, because every platform is going to have its fees that are part of using it. And so once you have your platforms, your messaging, and you know what your donor experience is going to be, what does it look like from A to Z for them, then you can start accepting crypto and raising money in a way that you may not have expected and may bring in more revenue than you anticipated. So if you would like to know more, or if you would like to work with us on crypto, setting up your cryptocurrency policies, feel free to reach out. And again, this week has been a combination of my 9-week boot camp as well as fundraising with cryptocurrency. These are all areas that we work in on a regular basis. And so we'd love to work with you. If you have any questions, feel free to go to the website. You can schedule an appointment with us at your convenience. So thank you so much for letting me present today. Are there any questions before I wrap up? Hello? Oh, it may be me.